Hi students. So for this lecture video, we will discuss variables, research designs, and the different sampling techniques. Now, when we talk of variables, these are the building blocks of your research. Variables, as the word would suggest, it's something that varies. Therefore, if it is something that varies, it is the one that you are studying. In research, there are two variables of main interest. The first one is the one that causes an outcome or an effect, or the one that influences the other. This is what you call your independent variable. But if that variable is something that changes because you influence something on it, you call that a dependent variable. Sometimes some variables may have an effect, no? May have an effect over your outcome, but you do not intend or you're not interested with that, then that is what you call your extraneous variables. Now, variables need to be defined when you do your research. When you define it based on textbook or on dictionary or based on universally acceptable definition, you call that a conceptual definition. But if you define your variable based on how you will use it in your research, you call that an operational definition. Okay? Now, variables can be classified into different types as well. No? It can be a demographic variable. No? A demographic variable is a variable that describes your study participants. No? It defines your study participants. Okay? It is important to know the demographic variables of your participants because it gives context to your results. No? Kasi when you do your results and discussion part of your research paper, you need to give context, no? On where are you coming from? Kung saan nagmumula ang research paper ninyo. Kung saan nagmumula ang mga pinagkukuhan ninyong data. So you need to describe it. Hence, you need to define or collect, no, data about your demographic variable. Demographic variable can be categorized, no? Hence, you call it categorical variable, no? Or categorical variable. It can be categorized. For example, no? For example, you want to categorize the demographic variable of social class or social standing. No? It can be rich, no? Upper but not rich based on based on PIDS, no? Or Philippine Institute for Development Studies. No? Upper class, no? Middle, etc., etc. If you define the income by that way, that variable, social standing, is considered a categorical variable. But if your category or if your categories fall only on two classifications, you can call that a dichotomous variable. No? Now, it is not limited only to demographic variable. Minsan yung mga responses, no, can be dichotomous, no, like a yes or no, true or false. Those are measurements or categories in a dichotomous variable. Okay? So pag tinanong ka, kumain ka na ba? Yes or no, that particular variable, kumain ka na ba, is a dichotomous variable if you classified it to two. Pero kung hindi mo naman siya classify into two, ginawa mo siyang konti, medyo kumain ako ng konti, or naparami yung kain ko, no? Or hindi pa ako kumakain, gutom na ako. Okay? That variable, kumain ka na ba, becomes categorical variable. Variables are also defined based on how the numbers are expressed, no? How the measurements are expressed. It can be a continuous variable, meaning it can take any form of number to be true, no? as a variable. For example, temperature. Temperature is a continuous variable because any number, in any form, no, we can express temperature in any number, no, mapa number na decimal yan, no, integer, fraction, no, it is still valid kahit anong number ang makuha mo. So that's continuous variable. A variable that has measurement, no, that takes on different forms of number or any form of number to be valid. But if a variable or its measurement, no, is can only take, no, whole numbers as a valid response or as a valid measure, you call that discrete variable. For example, tinanong kayo, ilan kayong magkakapatid sa pamilya? How many are you in the family? You cannot say that you are 4.5 in the family. But rather, you will say 4, 5, 6. And that's a valid expression. That variable, number of siblings, size of household, becomes a discrete variable. Okay, because it can only take whole numbers. No? Now, variables in quantitative studies need to be measured. Now, we have to classify levels of measurement for your variables because this has implication on what statistical test you will do and what decision-making tool will you use, no? Or what descriptive statistic you will use. Okay? So, here's the list, no, of the levels of measurement based on the levels, no, of measurement based on their increasing rank. Okay? Nominal, ordinal measurement, interval measurement, ratio level measure. When we say a variable is of nominal measurement, okay, the values, no, that are used to express this particular variable is only for categories, is only in categories. Okay? So the measurements are only named or categorized. But also take note that nominal measures or levels, nominal measures of variable or of a variable takes on the concept of mutual exclusivity and exhaustiveness. What does it mean? When we say mutually exclusive, all of the measurements are related to each other but does not overlap. So kapag sinabing sex ang measurement, no, it should be male or female, no? Nothing in between. But if you say gender, okay, this is a wider concept which covers lesbians, gays, bisexual, transsexuals, etc. So even though it is exclusive, even though they are mutually related, they are different from each other. So that is the concept of mutual exclusivity or being a mutually exclusive measurement. When we say exhaustive, ibig sabihin, all of the possible responses, no, all of the possible measurements are anticipated for that variable. Okay? Now, since nominal variables are done for the sake of naming or categorizing, we cannot summarize this particular measurement by mean or by computation. We cannot compute for the standard deviation kasi there's no numerical value for that measurement. No? Even if you say that you assign male or female as 1 and 2, you cannot compute, no, if that variable is in nominal measurement. Kahit na may number yan. Basta kapag ang sense or ang context ng variable is in nominal nature, you cannot compute, no, for the mean sex, wala namang ganon, or the standard deviation of sex. Walang ganon. Okay? Because that is done for the sake of naming. So therefore, we cannot summarize it using mean or standard deviation, but rather, we can summarize it by frequency distribution, no? Gagawa tayo ng percentage ng mga objects, okay, or events in each categories. To do a statistical test for this one, we could use the non-parametric test. No? As we progress with our nursing research class, we will discuss the different types of tests that we can use, no, for different types of variables and different types of research questions. Okay, so that's it about nominal measurement. When we talk of ordinal measurement, it's like your uh, nominal measurement, no? Categorized, no? Mutually exclusive, no? Pati exhaustive, nandun din yung element na yon. But what makes it different or higher than nominal measurement is that it has an element of rank ordering or ranking, no? This makes it this makes our measurement somewhat depict, no, difference of values, no, based on increasing rank. Okay? Yun nga lang, when measurements are done, no, when measurements are done by ordinal measurement, no, rank ordering, there's still no specified differences between the ranks. What does it mean? No? When we say, for example, when we say social status as poor, middle class, no, and rich, but we did not specify kung ano yung number na naghihiwalay sa kanila, that's an ordinal measurement. Merong rank, mayroong category, but the interval between differences, no, are not specified. Okay? Again, this ordinal measurement does not contain arithmetic value. Walang arithmetic value, so we cannot compute. Again, for mean, no, standard deviation, again, we can only do frequency distribution or percentage of objects and event in each category. So this one uses non-parametric test. Okay? For interval level of measure, this is higher than your ordinal level of measure. Okay? Meron pong categories, may mga categories pa din. Same elements, may category, may mutual exclusivity, may exhaustiveness, okay? Merong rank order, and this time, the distance between the ranks are specified. No? The distance between ranks are specified. So if we want to use an interval level of measure, no? An interval level of measure, we can use an actual number of on a scale. Okay? A number on the scale. So for example, your pain scale of 1 to 10, that uses interval level of measure. No? This interval level of measure, another characteristic of it is your arbitrary 0 point. No? When we say arbitrary 0 point, the 0 point of being zero of that measurement is subjective. What do I mean? Iba-iba siya between contexts. No? For example, pain scale. A pain scale of 1, no, or 0, or the 0 point, no, kumbaga, no pain, might be different from one person to the other. So that exhibits, no, your interval level of measure. Okay? Now, interval level of measure contain arithmetic value. Meron na po siyang arithmetic value. So we can use statistical test, no? Mean. We can compute for the mean. We can compute for the standard deviation for this level of measurement. No? And this time we use parametric test kasi nga may arithmetic value na siya. So we can use parametric test for hypothesis testing and decision making. And lastly, the highest level of them all is your ratio level. So again, the categories, lahat ng characteristic meron siya, no? Yung categorized, rank order, distance between zero, or the ranks rather, and the actual numbers on the scale. But this time, the defining characteristic for ratio level is yung tinatawag na absolute 0 point. So ibig sabihin, when we say 0 point in this particular measure, everywhere it is recognized as a 0 point. Example, zero heartbeat, no? Zero heartbeat, zero blood pressure. No? Those are absolute 0 points. No? So pag wala ka ng pera, that's an absolute measure, no? Na wala ka na talagang pera. So it's in ratio level of measure. Okay? Pag tinanong kayo kung gaano kayo kahirap, kung walang pera, as in zero, that's a ratio level of measure. So that's it all about our variables. Now, the next step that you will develop, no, in your research paper is your research design. How you will conduct your research. Now, there are several factors that affect your research design. Kung anong design ang gagamitin mo. Okay? It can be because of function, time, or control. Kung gagamit ka ba ng time or iibahin mo ba yung time, iibahin mo ba yung the way you collect your data, will you collect your data for a longer period of time? Or the function, ibig sabihin gagamit ka ba ng intervention, gagamit ka ba ng or you will observe naturally, or kung ano ba yung obserbahan mo. Also, research you will decide on your research design kung gagamit kayo ng control, no? Control, ibig sabihin gagamit ba kayo ng measures to prevent bias or reduce bias? So, that affects how you decide on your research design. Now, research design is also affected by the decisions with regards to the following aspect of the study. Sabi nga natin kanina, the presence of intervention, the type of comparison, control of extremes variables, time and frequency of data collection, study setting, and others. Now, here are some research designs, no, that we will discuss. We will discuss in depth, yung quantitative research designs. Okay? But let us discuss in passing the different qualitative research designs. No? Some qualitative research designs are unique based on study. No? Are uh, are unique for some studies. Okay? For ethnography, no, this is the study design used for anthropologists. No? Ethnography, because it deals with the study of culture. When we say phenomenology, this is a usual study design used by psychologists because it studies the lived experience of people living or having an experience over a certain phenomenon. No? Anong phenomenon iyon? Hindi yun yung katuluhan, no? Pangyayari iyon sa buhay. No? For example, lived experience ng mga babaeng nagpa-abort, no? So that could fall under phenomenology. When we say ethology, this is a study about the animalistic behavior or animalistic tendencies of humans. Okay, that's ethology. While grounded theory is an inductive research process where you develop, no, an abstract explanation of what you have observed. So for example, meron kayong inoobserbahan sa loob ng isang setting, no? In the hospital, for example, in ER, you want to know how communications go there. So you study the process, you observe, no? You record, you write down every observation that you notice. Okay? And then you make, no, an inductive approach, inductive analysis to to that, no, to your observations. And then you develop your own theory. That's your grounded theory. Okay? So the discourse analysis is another type of research where you try to understand how people talk to each other, how communication is conducted for a particular setting. While historical analysis, on the other hand, is a review of the past events, review of what happened before. You review what has transcribed, no, transpired, recorded, or even recalled, no, by some people who experienced that history. Okay, that's historical research. Okay, Sir, di naman po namin magagamit yan sa research in nursing. Diyan po kayo nagkakamali because majority or most researches or maraming researches ang gumagamit ng phenomenology, grounded theory, discourse analysis, historical analysis. Okay? So, all these researches, even though if it is not in our field, no, it is not in our field, it can be borrowed, no, to apply into our profession. Okay? Now, there are other types of research studies. By the way, you can read qualitative research studies in the qualitative research book, no, that I gave you in PDF. There are according to that author, there are 5 major approaches, no, in qualitative research in nursing, which is ethnography, phenomenology, grounded, historical, and participatory action research. You may refer to that book. You can read that book. It is advisable that you read that book for you to understand better, no, about these topics. No? Meron pa nga siyang binabanggit doon, no, in grounded theory. Meron pang binabanggit doon na types of grounded theory approaches, no? Uh, the the Straussian and the Glasserian approach. Now, there are two approaches in grounded theory, the Glasserian and Straussian approach. You can read that, okay? But in passing, I'm telling you, these are the 5, no? These are the 5 major qualitative approaches in nursing. Now, when we talk of quantitative researches, we can divide this into 2 major approach, no? The experimental, kung saan ikaw ay nag-i-insert, no, ng intervention in your research, and the other one which is non-experimental, no? Which can come in the form of descriptive research, i-describe lang kung anong meron or what happened. Exploratory research, which is about gaining a better or a deeper insight of a certain pangyayari. Another is yung tinatawag na correlational research, no, where you try to find out if there's a relationship between two variables. Or even comparative research, where you compare the outcomes between two groups, in groups, or whatever. Okay? So it can be an experimental research. Pag sinabing, ang main difference ng dalawa, ng experimental sa non-experimental, is that in experimental, there is an element of intervention, there is an element of manipulation. 3 subtypes or 3 subcategories can fall under experimental research design. It can be a true experimental design, a quasi-experimental design, or a pre-experimental design. Now, to help us understand what a true experimental is, we have to understand the 3 major elements of true experimental research. A true experimental research contains these 3 main components. No? The first component is the presence of intervention or manipulation. No? In this slide, you can see it, or it will be signified as an X, no? Or intervention. Another element for research, true experimental research, is the presence of randomization. No? Randomization in sampling and randomization in selection. Magkaiba po yun, ha? Pag sinabing randomization in sampling, you get, no, or you get samples, no, randomly. You give each participant, you give each person in your target population the chance to be selected as a member of your research. Okay? And the third component of your true experimental research design is the presence of your control group. Okay? What is the purpose? Balikan natin yung randomization. What is the purpose of randomizing everything in the selection process, the sampling or pagpili ng element or ng subject? Because randomization reduces bias. No? It removes the preference that you have, no, the preference of the respondents, no, to influence, no, your results your outcomes. Okay? By eliminating their bias, by eliminating their preference, no, your study becomes more rigorous. Mas kapani-paniwala, no? Mas matibay ang inyong outcome. Now, another important element is the presence of a control group. No? Pag sinabing presence of control group, the control group is the group where you do not apply a research intervention. Kaya dito sa ating presentation, dito sa ating illustration, wala ang X sa control group. Okay? Sir, ano po yung mga O na pinipresent ninyo? O stands for observation or the time that you get your data from your respondents. So this one represents the intervention group. This one represents your control group. Why do we need a control group? Kasi nga, we want to compare whether there is a difference kung doon sa experimental group ay meron pa talagang difference kesa doon sa group na hindi naman tumanggap ng intervention. No? So a true experimental research design can take in several forms. No? You can do a classical pre-test, post-test control group design. Tinawag siyang ganito kasi meron kang pre-test na observation and may post-test observation ka rin na ginawa. Okay? Pre-test bago mag-apply ng intervention. Post-test bago mag-apply ng intervention. Ay, after pala, rather. After maglagay ng intervention. Another is what you call your post-test only control group design. Sometimes, hindi na natin magawang mag-intervene or maggawa ng pre-test observation. No? Ginagawa rin ng post-test only control group design kapag may kapag yung pre-test will introduce a bias or a review or additional knowledge related doon sa ating intervention. So example, para mag-gets nyo yung sinasabi. Example, I am doing a review class and I want to know whether my students will have a different score after. No? So I will conduct a pretest. Ang tanong, will that pretest influence the knowledge of the participants nung mga magte-take ng pretest, mag-undergo ng review? The answer is yes. No? Kapag nag-pretest, maaalala ng estudyanteng nagre-review, na-review namin to, na-review namin ganyan. So it may influence the way your outcomes will come out. Your results will come out. Not necessarily by the intervention itself, which is the review program. Okay? But it may be also influenced by an extraneous variable na na-encounter sa pretest. So to avoid it, alisin na lang yung pretest. Yun nga lang, the problem is wala tayong baseline data. No? Wala tayong baseline data to compare with or to compare sa simula kung may pagbabago ba. Okay? So to resolve that issue of pretest bias, we introduce a Solomon 4 group design. Okay? So wag malito po sa Solomon 4 group design, there are 4 sets of groups. The first 2 groups will be your classical pre-test post-test design. No? Yung baba naman will be your post-test only control group design. Sir, hindi ka namin masundan. Tignan nyo po yung drawing. No? This one is the classical pre-test post-test. This one is the post-test only control group design. Alright? So to resolve the issue of the pretest bias and the lack of baseline data, we perform a Solomon 4 group design. Now, another type of experimental research design is your factorial design. No, sometimes there are variables that interact with each other. They interact with each other. They have a different set, no? They have a different set, no? Kapag magkahiwalay sila, they have a different set of effect, no? Pero pag pinagsama mo, may different set of effect din. Pero sometimes hindi mo rin naman mapaghiwalay yung dalawang yon, no? What is an example? A perfect example will be, no, if you want to know whether the tactile and auditory and visual stimulus, no, on an infant will have an effect to his or her growth and development. Hindi mo naman po pwedeng alisin yung sight ng bata. Hindi mo naman pwedeng alisin yung pandinig, no? Hindi mo naman pwedeng alisin yung kanyang pakiramdam, no? Or yung kanyang tactile senses, no? So to address that, isama mo na rin siya sa research. Yun nga lang, gagamit ka ng factorial level or factorial design, which analyzes the factors at different levels, no? And at different cells that they have. Okay? Now, another type of experimental research design is what you call your repeated measures or crossover design. Okay? When we say repeated measure, you try to observe a particular intervention when it is applied different times in the study, or how many times it is not applied into your study. Because you want to know whether if that particular design can be applied over and over again. No? Sometimes it does not have an effect on the first application. No? So that's it. You use a repeated measure or crossover design if you need to observe, no, further increase in application of your intervention. The next type of experimental research design is your quasi-experimental designs. In quasi-experimental designs, the word quasi, it means like, or the prefix quasi means like. So this is like an experiment. However, it lacks the element or one of the elements of a true experimental research design, which is randomization. Kasi not all the times randomization can be applied, no? Or is it easy to apply? Okay? We use quasi-experimental research because, or this design can be used because it's convenient, it's practical for researchers, no? To complete the research. Okay? So it can be a non-equivalent control group before after design, or it can be a time series design where you observe several times that particular intervention is applied. Another category of experimental research design is yung tinatawag nating pre-experimental design. Sa pre-experimental design, there are two of the elements of research of experimental research is removed. Yung randomization and the control group. Okay? So the control group and randomization are not present. Hence, we cannot compare it with the baseline data, and we cannot confirm that bias is eliminated. Okay? So pre-experimental research designs. Now, kanina ko pa sinasabi yung control group. The control group, sabi natin, this is where we compare our results from the intervention group. So what defines a control group? How can we say that this is a control group? Just make sure a defining characteristic of a control group is a group without an intervention. Okay? Hindi mo ginamitan ng experimental intervention mo. Or this can be a group with an alternative treatment, no, other than your experimental design or experimental treatment. Okay? Or it can be a group with a pseudo intervention or placebo. Meron siyang placebo. or those groups that receive the standards of care, no, standard methods of care, or those who receive lower dose or intensity or parts of a treatment. Also, it can be a group with delayed treatment. So sa makatuwid, a control group is a group that is receiving the usual, no? The usual treatment kumpara doon sa pinag-aaralan mong experimental treatment. In that way, it can be viewed that the control group is the normalizing group, no? Yung normal group na pagkukumparahan mo. Okay? Now, there are other research designs, no? Meron tayong tinatawag na randomized clinical trials. We will discuss that later. These clinical trials are done for the experimentation of drugs. It undergoes several phases. Later on, we will discuss. Other types of designs or research designs are what you call as evaluation research, okay? Where you analyze the process, the outcome, impact analysis, cost-benefit analysis. That's a research design, okay? The surveys are done, no? Surveys are done to note public knowledge. Case studies are individual analysis, no, of cases, okay? Secondary analysis are other types of research. When we talk of methodologic research or methodological research, these are researches designed, no, to test, no, the validity, reliability of a questionnaire, a research tool, no, that you will use or you want to establish. So pag nakabasa kayo ng psychometric properties of a certain tool na research title, that's a methodological research. When you do a needs assessment, no, where you assess, no, kung ano yung mga kailangan ng isang group of people or company or organization, you're doing that type of research or that research design. When we talk of meta-analysis or meta-synthesis, we try to find the common ground, no, or to synthesize several literature that have similar research designs, research outcomes, no? Similar in terms of mga variables pinag-uusapan, but may have different results. Sometimes kasi for a certain topic, there are different researches na nagko-contradict ng result over a certain topic. No? May mga ganon. Meron din naman mga research na they agree on that one. So they try to contradict each other. So to make it clearer on that particular topic, they do a meta-analysis of that topic. No? So a meta-analysis is a quantitative analysis of these researches. No? Ino-compute yung publication bias, no? Effect sizes, okay? So yun yung ginagawa sa meta-analysis, kino-compute and then they will find it out, no? Meta-synthesis on the other hand is a synthesis of all qualitative researches on a particular topic. So si meta-analysis is for quantitative, meta-synthesis is for qualitative research. Okay? Now, another type of research design is your Delphi survey. A Delphi survey is a research, no, that seeks the consensus of panel of experts. So for a particular topic, meron kang gustong ipasagot sa mga eksperto. So when they arrive into a consensus, they arrive to a common theme, no, doon sa particulars na question mo. What you did is called a Delphi survey. You try to get a consensus of the public or of the panel of experts. Now, mixed method studies are studies that take quantitative and qualitative designs at the same time. Sometimes kasi, there are more oftentimes, no, quantitative studies are not enough, no, to conclude, no, or to conclude a certain outcome. Quantitative studies also have weakness, can also have weakness on the depth, no, ng data na dapat mong makuha. Kasi puro numbers lang eh. So to get a more valid result, to get a more robust result, you use a mixed method study. You follow up your quantitative study with a qualitative method, no? Gagamit ka ng interview, gagamit ka ng observation, gagamit ka ng notes, no? To verify your quantitative findings. Now, when you do this, you are actually doing a process of triangulation or verification of your findings with another source of data. All right? So here's your clinical trial. Sabi natin kanina, clinical trials, no, are important study designs, no, that test, no, the effectiveness of drugs. No, in our times, sa mga panahon ngayon, ginagamit ang matunog, no, ang clinical trial kasi we are testing a vaccine for the effectiveness. These are done, no, to test the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccine. So what are the stages in clinical trials? Bakit ba matagal ang pagsusuri o pagkuha or paggawa, no, ng vaccine? Because it undergoes different phases, no? The first phase is what you call your phase 1. This is the stage where you finalize the method, the dose, okay? The method, the dose, and other details of your study. Dito mo pag-aaralan kung attenuated ba yung vaccine, no? Or recombinant DNA ba, whichever is safe, no? So after the phase 1, you finalize the dosage, the safety, the tolerance. You now proceed to preliminary testing, no, of your research, which is your phase 2. The phase 2 research is a small-scale study design wherein you test the drug or the vaccine over a small number of people, no, to seek preliminary evidence. Mahanapin mo kung ano yung effect niya sa isang maliit na grupo. Phase 3 clinical trials are trials conducted on a larger scale, no? Phase 3 clinical trials are done sometimes in different settings, no? Kaya kung naririnig ninyo sa news that a phase 3 clinical trial will be done, no? For example, in Cavite, a phase 3 clinical trial will be done because nagsa-start siyang kumuha ng data on a larger group of people. No? So, ginagawa minsan multinational kasi they want to test whether the effect of the vaccine on different nationalities. No? Kasi iba-iba yung ating genetic composition. No, one might be effective for a certain group of people, no? Another group of people hindi naman effective. Okay? So phase 3 clinical trial is to fully test, no, the treatment. Take note that the stages or these studies in every stage are always conducted in randomized fashion. Hindi siya yung kung sino lang gustong sumali. No? Sounds familiar? Sounds familiar ba kung sino yung gustong sumali? Because, again, sabi nga natin, if we exert our influence or our preference in study result, it may alter the findings. Okay? Now, after passing or after completing phase 3 clinical trial, that's the time that you can say that the drug is effective. Okay? You will apply it now for regulatory licenses para maging available sa bansa na gustong pagbentahan ng gamot. Okay? Kasi one of the requirements for application of drug license is to get, no, is to have a published phase 3 result, no, phase 3 clinical trial result. So does it stop there? Kapag nag-phase 3 clinical trial ka, doon ba magsa-stop yung research process? No. After the phase 3 clinical trial, no, at nailunsad na yung drug sa market, no, that drug will undergo the phase 4, no, trial, which is concerned on the long-term consequences of treatment as it is used in actual practice. So if you have encountered drugs, no, if you have encountered drugs that were being recalled after it is released into the market, that is because, no, may result na magsasabi na itong drug na ito ay delikado for long term. And that came from phase 4 clinical trials. All right? Now, the third part that we will just discuss, or third concept, no, or the third component of your research paper would be your sampling. No? When you do research on a group of people, you wanted that your research would be applicable for all. So common sense would tell you that you get everyone, no, to be included in your research. Uh, however, we cannot include everyone in our research. We cannot include them as a study participant. Why? Numero uno, it's not practical. We do not have all the funds, no? So what we do is to limit it. Okay? So we limit it only to a group of people, not which we want to generalize our findings. So we want to look for our target population. So kanina yung binabanggit ko, yung everyone will refer to your population. But then we want to refer only to the one, to a group only where we wish to generalize, no, yung findings ng ating study. Okay, and that would be your target population. Now, the target population can be your accessible population, no? Pero malaki pa rin 'yon, no? The target population might be a group of people which is too big for you to handle. Okay? But if you will look into your group of to the population that is accessible to you, you term that as your accessible population. Now, for your target population to materialize, you need to apply a criteria or characteristic, no, for inclusion in the target population. So to get the population or the people to be included into your target population, you use your sampling criteria. Okay? Because these are the characteristics essential for inclusion in the target population. So from the next term that is usually used in sampling is what you call your sampling frame, or the actual list of the elements from which the sample will be chosen. Sa madaling salita, listahan ng mga taong dapat masama sa inyong, or mga dapat mong kunan ng elements in your sample. Now, pag sinabing sampling, this refers to the process of selecting a portion of the population to represent the entire population, while the sample is the subset of units that comprise the population. So the elements, on the other hand, are the units that make up the sample or population, most basic unit about which information is collected. So for example, a student, a patient, a chart, or a record. Okay? So every individual that formed the sample will be termed as your element. No? Bawat tao. Other terms in sampling is what you call your random sampling, or yung technique in which every member of the population has a probability higher than 0 of being selected as a sample. No? So you give them an equal chance to be selected as a sample. On the other hand, pag sinabi naman nating random sampling or random assignment would refer to a procedure used to randomly assign a person either to the treatment or the control group. No? Kanina pinag-usapan natin yung treatment and control group. Sa random assignment, sa pag-assign sa grupo, sa dalawang grupo na yon, you randomly assign them either. No? Hindi mo sila papipiliin because you want to eliminate bias. Okay? Now, there are two types or two categories of sampling designs. It can be probability sampling design and non-probability sampling design. This one uses randomization. This one does not use randomization. Kaya non-probability sampling. In non-probability sampling, there are different types. It can be in the form of convenience sampling or getting the sample who are readily available for the researchers. For example, ako isang researcher, pagpasok ko sa classroom, nakita ko yung mga estudyante ko, na nandun sa loob ng classroom. Sila yung ginawa kong respondent for my study. Then that's what you call your convenience sampling. Pero kapag ginawa mong ambush interview, sino-sino lang makasalubong mo during the course of your paglalakad sa araw, kinuha mo siya bilang isang respondent, that's what you call your accidental sampling. Okay? When we say purposive or judgmental sampling, when you say purposive or judgmental sampling, you do select your research respondents based on who can give the best information. Kumbaga, based on your own knowledge, pipiliin mo kung sino yung makakapagbigay ng magandang information for your research. For example, if your topic is about dialysis, you will choose patients who undergo dialysis. Diba? That's purposive or judgmental sampling. Okay? Another type of non-probability sampling is what we call your quota or quota sampling. Pag sinabing quota sampling, this is a sampling technique where you set a criteria for choosing who should be part of your research. For example, you're conducting a research experiment on the effectiveness of classical music sa heartbeat ng bata. And you said that all women who are on the third trimester of their pregnancy, under a certain doctor, will be included in this research. You set a criteria, for the sampling, or selection of the sample. You do that. When you do that, that is termed as a quota sampling. You set a criteria. When we talk of network or chain or snowball sampling, this is a sampling where you get referrals from other people, probably because your topic is is a taboo, or the respondents for your topic is rare, hard to find. You use networking, you use referral sampling, or you use snowball sampling to get more respondents as you move along your research process. Kaya siya tinawag na snowball. Kasi imagine mo yung snowball habang gumugulong, lumalaki. Ganun din sa snowball sampling technique. Habang gumagalaw ka sa research mo, lumalaki rin ang samples mo. Because you ask for referrals. Alright? So that's about non-probability sampling. Now, let's go to randomized sampling or the probability sampling. It can be in the form of simple random sampling. In simple random sampling, the best technique or the most basic technique will be your fishbowl technique. Gagawa ka ng names sa piece of paper ng mga respondents mo, and make sure that this piece of paper is of the same color, same size, same manner of folding, kung ilang fold, tsaka yung pinangsulat mo will not reveal the contents ng name ng mga pieces of paper mo. tapos ilalagay mo doon sa fishbowl, and then you pick as if you do not know who you pick. So that's your fishbowl technique. Another type of simple random sampling would be the designation of random number. No? Ito, lumang technique na to, ginagamit to. Dati ginagamit pa to. Ewan ko lang ngayon. No? You assign random digits using a table of random numbers for each sample. No? Ngayon meron na sa Excel ng rand number function. So you assign a random number function for a particular participant, and then you pick which random number ang mapipili mo sa iyong research. No? The next type is what you call the next sampling technique, randomized sampling technique will be your systematic random sampling, no? Wherein you use a sampling interval to determine your sample. In systematic random sampling, you compute for a sampling interval or yung tinatawag na K, which is formulated by the formula capital N divided by the small n, where the capital N is your target population and your N is your sample size. So after computing, so let's have an example. If you have a target population of 30 and you only need 6 for your sample size, the sampling interval would be 30 divided by 6 equals 5. So the interval will be used to determine whether who will be part of your sample size, or of your sample rather. So to do this, to apply this, we pick our first element randomly, no? So for example, nag-random pick tayo ng number 8. No? Sinabi natin, si Garcia will be the first, will be the first element in our sample. So we apply our sampling interval, okay? We apply our sampling interval in our sampling frame. Ito yon, yung listahan natin. And we count 5 to determine who is the next participant. So we count 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The second element of our sample will be Lunsaga. You count 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Next is Torreja. Then we count another 5. 1. Dahil ito yung dulo, babalikan mo yung una. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Divina. So, 4 na yon. Hanggang sa makumpleto mo yung 6 na sample size. Kuha? So that would be your systematic random sampling. That's how you do it. Okay? You need a sampling list. You need a sampling interval. You pick the first element randomly. You count, until you complete your sample size. The next type is your stratified random sampling, or sampling based on, or random sampling based on a naturally occurring strata in the field. No? Naturally occurring strata in the field. So you do a stratified random sampling. It's like it's actually dividing the group, dividing the population into strata that naturally occurs, in that particular population. Usual dyan, sex, usual dyan yung social classes, depende sa konteksto ng research problem. So you divide them according to strata, and then you perform random sampling or systematic random sampling from each, from each stratum. Okay? You can do it in a systematic manner, or in unproportionate manner. But you can also do it in a proportionate manner. No? Pag sinabing proportionate number, equal yung sample mo, yung strata ng sample mo, proportionate doon sa strata ng target population mo. So this is computed by ratio or proportion. Say, let's have an example. So for this, in a target population of 100, 60 males, meron tayong 60 males at meron tayong 40 females. So we want to determine a proportionate number of males for our sample size, which is, sabi natin, 20. So how do we compute? Okay, we do it like this, no? Sa 60 males na meron sa target population of 100, ilan ang magiging sample na males natin kapag ang sample size natin ay 20 lamang? Okay? So naka-ratio and proportion siya na arrangement. You cross-multiply 60 times 20, that's 1,200. Divided by 100, that will be 12 males. So how will you find the number of females? Isubtract lang po yung 12 males. Dahil dalawa lang naman strata ang binanggit ko dito. Yung 12 males, isubtract doon sa 20 na sample size, you get the 8 females. Proportionate? Yes. No? That's how you do a proportionate stratified random sampling. The fourth random sampling technique is what you call your cluster sampling. No? That would be your assignment. No? Read that in your book. Okay? Read that in your book. So it's easy. It's self-explanatory. So you can also cite the example from the book of Pollitt for that one. As a general rule, to determine your sample size, sample sizes can be computed or can be determined by estimation, no, or by computation. So by estimation, we can have a large estimate, which is 50% of the target population, or it can be a small estimate, which is around 30%, okay, of the target population. So if we determine our sample size by computation, we use Slovin's formula, okay, which banks on, no, the level of significance, no, or the sampling error, which is usually around 0.05 or 0.01, depending on the level set, no, by the researcher. Now, tandaan lang po, in quantitative study, the larger your sample size, the more it can be assumed that the sample is normally distributed or representative of the population. Well, mas malaking sample size, mas representative sa quantitative. Iba naman po ang usapin when it comes to qualitative study. In qualitative study, if your sample size is too large, data management is hard, would be difficult, no? Kasi you're dealing with a lot of text, no? It's difficult to manage the data in qualitative study. Now, there's an author for qualitative research or an expert, Creswell, said that we can start with 5, no? With an initial of 5 respondents or 5 key informants for qualitative researches. Okay? Ang usapin lang, sa qualitative research, dapat tatandaan na ang ating respondent size would be rolling. Anong ibig sabihin? Kapag ka nag-reach tayo ng saturation, hanggat hindi pa tayo nag-reach ng saturation, the number of our interviewees or samples will keep on rolling until it reach data saturation. What does it mean? Data saturation is the point where all data, all narratives, no, that were given to you are repetitive, no? Wala ka nang makuhang bago. So kung paulit-ulit na siya at wala ka nang makuhang bago, you stop, no? You stop. Okay? You stop your data collection. All right? And sample acquisition. Okay? By saturation. So, chine-check din sa qualitative study yung adequacy, kung sapat na ba yung data na nakuha mo, or appropriateness, or yung fittingness, no, or its applicability for a particular situation. Another determinant of sample size would be the nature of your population. If your population is homogeneous, pag sinabing homogeneous, pare-pareho ng characteristic, you need only a small sample size. No? For example, lahat sila say sa group ng estudyante na gusto mong pag-aralan, lahat sila pare-pareho ng curriculum, pare-pareho ng year level, pare-pareho ng uh, uh, instruction na tatanggap sa teacher, no? Yung pag ang sample mo ay pare-pareho ng characteristic, it's homogeneous. So if it's homogeneous, then any outcome, no, would be applicable to that group sa population na yon. So a small sample size would be enough for that particular type of group. Pero kapag ang sample mo ay non-homogeneous o heterogeneous kung tawagin, ang magkakaiba, no? That's the time that you increase your sample size. Okay? Iba-iba ng demographic. Kasi nga, magkakaiba sila ng possible na magkakaiba ang kanilang mga responses. Okay? Take also into consideration, no, in determining your sample size, your attrition rate and response rate. No, pag sinabing attrition rate, yung pagbaback out, no, non-returning of responses, okay? Yung mga na-lost in follow-up, that's your attrition. No? Take note of that rate, kung gaano karami at anong ilang percentage out of your total respondents. Kung ina-expect mo na mataas ang attrition rate ng iyong research, tuwing kailan nangyayari ito? Kapag yung research mo ay matagal ang data collection, no? Pag matagal ang data collection ng research mo, mataas ang chances na mag-back out yung mga respondents mo. Kasi syempre, yung tagal mo silang aabalahin, kaya may chance talagang mag-back out sila. Kapag mataas ang attrition rate, taasan mo ang sample size. Okay? The response rate is the rate where your respondents completed the study, no? Completed the data or give you the data completely. All right? Now, larger size, ito lang po tatandaan. Larger size, no, are used when small effect sizes are anticipated. High attrition and low response rate, high level of statistical significance is computed, and that the population is heterogeneous. Kapag ka smaller size, ginagamit lang po yan. Kapag ka in-depth data is required, population is homogeneous, and the variation within the population is less. No? So why do we need, no, to state in our paper the sampling type, no, that we do? Because this will have an implication on our results and conclusion. No? We have to relate, no? We have to connect our findings with the subject withdrawal, lost to follow up, exclusion inclusion criteria, researcher bias, because this will tell something about our results. Okay? So that's why we need to mention it in our paper, and we need to relate it truthfully so that our papers or our results will be more cogent. So here is a tabulated summary of what we have discussed. Okay. So I'll leave this as a completion or final note, no, for our lecture. Should you have any questions, you may send me a Facebook message through my messenger. You can email me. You can send through my Canvas or through our Canvas account. And if you want to discuss or to start a discussion in our Facebook group, you may do so. So with that, I end my lecture. I hope you learned something from me. Okay? So with that, I end and I say goodbye and have a nice week.